Hi, this is the Tropical Tidbit for Monday evening, November 9th. As always, the thoughts here are mine alone, and in making decisions, consult the National Hurricane Center and your local weather office for the best information. We're watching Tropical Storm Eta now swung around down back toward the western end of Cuba. We talked about this yesterday as being the new track forecast after originally being expected to sneak up the western Florida coastline. We're seeing it hooking around a little bit more now, and part of that is due to the fact that it's pinwheeling around this upper level low, which is located to its east aloft here. You might be able to make out some of that rotation, and so the two are kind of pinwheeling each other, with Eta being the one that's getting forced toward the south as this one comes north. And this influence will begin to fade overnight tonight and tomorrow, and we'll see this southward progress likely halt at some point, and then the storm may come back toward the north. And we'll talk about that in a second. Fortunately, today we've seen a break in some of the rainfall over most of South Florida, where intense flooding has been occurring since yesterday. There is a new batch of moisture coming up to the east of this upper level low that may rotate back up into South Florida at some point overnight tonight or tomorrow morning, and we may get a little bit more rain, but it looks like the heaviest rainfall has already occurred since the system has now gotten far enough away that we're not directly in the rain shield. And you can see that the storm is actually rather small at the moment. And one of the things that happened is, we had this huge field of moisture and strong easterly flow to the north of this thing when it was near Cuba. But this has kind of wrapped up all the dry air that was coming into it as it's interacted with this upper level low. And now the dry air is kind of circulating around the storm and has kind of left the old moisture field marooned off to the northeast. And what we have is a smaller storm in an environment that is fairly dry around it. And this is the water vapor satellite imagery. And you'll see the edge of the moisture shield is very clearly outlined here on the western side, where right on this boundary of light gray to dark gray, we have very, very dry air here. And the moisture is currently still near the storm, but very dry to the west, and there's some dry air on the eastern side under this upper low as well. So the storm is currently nestled within the last remaining batch of moisture. And at the exact moment, this actually isn't too bad of an environment for the storm in terms of future intensification. Outflow is a little restricted, but beside that, we actually have a tiny core of convection here, and this inner core wind field has been rather well defined throughout the last couple of days, and that tight wind field has just been rotating round and round. And even though it wrapped in dry air yesterday, we didn't see a lot of thunderstorms when it was here south of Miami, but now that it's had about a day or so since then, it's picking up new moisture off the ocean and starting to replenish the moisture right above the center of the cyclone, and so we see this redevelopment of thunderstorm activity over the center. If we look at the recon data from earlier, this is a few hours old now as of this recording, showing that southwestern track, and pressure still in the mid-990s. Not a whole lot different from yesterday. Max winds on the north side were only about 50 miles an hour, according to the plane. They could be getting a little bit higher again overnight tonight and tomorrow if the storm does take advantage of the chance that it has with this inner core structure. Strengthening would not be surprising, and it is over the loop current right now, which currently runs like this in the southern Gulf of Mexico. This bubble here is very, very warm in terms of ocean water and depth, and it's right over that very warmest tongue at the moment. So it does have a chance to re-intensify, and it wouldn't be too surprising to see this become a hurricane over the southern Gulf over the next couple of days. The question then becomes, where is this going? We can see that it's pinwheeled around here, kind of an odd track that it's taking. Where is this storm going? Well, if we look at the very upper level flow here, this is 200 millibars up at the jet level, the very upper troposphere. We can see where Eta is, and we can see the upper low that I showed you on water vapor imagery. Remember, that's right here. There's Eta, upper level low to its east. You can see that on the flow chart. There's Eta and the upper low there over Cuba. And as these kind of come to an end of their pinwheeling phase, we'll go forward here and see that eventually the southward motion will stop. This upper low will start to dissipate. And now what's going to happen is we have kind of this background westerly flow aloft, big jet stream over the southeastern or the southern U.S., and then generally westerly flow, which is very common here in November. It's basically winter season at this point. Very common to have a westerly jet across the Gulf. Going to try to start pushing this back toward Florida once more. But the catch here is that the flow is aloft, and so it would take a strong and thus tall storm to feel this flow up at this altitude. If you start going lower down, you'll see what starts happening here. If we look at 500 millibar instead, by Wednesday night and Thursday, instead of just a straight westerly flow across the Gulf, you see it's more of a ridge at the mid-levels here that is starting to bring flow that comes out of the northwest instead in the middle levels. And so this is starting to push on the cyclone from the north and also causing a bit of shear, because if we go down one more level to 850 millibars, now at the bottom of the troposphere, what you'll see is that there is strong southerly flow on the western flank of this ridge, but we don't have a very strong ridge here on the western side, so there's not really a big northerly flow like there is in the mid-levels here. I showed you that doesn't really exist in the lower levels, and so what you really have is a southerly steering flow in the lower levels, but in the mid-levels you have a northwesterly steering flow. These two are crossing each other. That's a very strong shear here, about 30 knots or so. And so what ends up happening, if you look at the moisture field on the GFS at this time, is again, this is the mid-level flow and wind barbs here, so you see the northwesterly flow. First of all, it's very dry, but you can see it pushing that moisture field off to the eastern side of the cyclone, and this is a very strong shear, so you will see the moisture get stripped away and leave the cyclone completely devoid of moisture, and we start getting this dry northwest flow directly over the surface cyclone, and this ends up just dying over the Gulf of Mexico. It also doesn't go anywhere because now the low-level flow is kind of pushing it this way, and the mid-level flow is pushing it the opposite way, and there's really nothing to push it into Florida because it's no longer tall, because it's weakening, and so this upper-level flow here is not able to steer it back into the state. So if we just go forward here, you'll see that it just kind of drifts with the flow and ends up completely dead without going over land again, which is obviously great news. The caveat here is that this is not necessarily a guaranteed evolution. It does seem fairly likely that this shear will get strong, but if the storm happens to be a little bit stronger than modeled on the GFS, then maybe it is able to approach Florida prior to getting completely decoupled and dying as it shows on this run. So while this happens over water here, it may be that this happens closer to the western Florida coastline and we get a renewed round of impacts. And even on this run, if the storm is here, we have a renewed round of rainfall potentially by Wednesday night and Thursday. So something like this would not be without heavy weather re-entering the Florida Peninsula region. And just to give you an idea of some of the uncertainty here, we can look at the GFS ensemble for a range of solutions that the model currently thinks is possible. I think this does a reasonable job of showing you kind of the range of outcomes. This is where the storm currently is, moving southwest for a little while longer. That's a fairly confident bet. And then you can see it turns northward after about a day. And from there, it kind of depends on exactly how strong it gets, whether it turns to the left and kind of weakens, or if it's a little stronger, maybe it sneaks close to the West Florida coastline before all is said and done. So you can see some of the stronger members in orange here actually get up toward the Tampa Bay area. It's a lower probability chance based on model guidance today, but it's still technically on the table. So we'll watch to see if this sneaks closer to the coast. And what we've seen from NHC is a general shift offshore during the last day or two. Original forecasts had this curving back up into western Florida. We've seen them come a little bit more into agreement with the current day's model guidance, staying offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, moving only slowly northward through the weekend. They don't have it intensifying much during the whole forecast period, but like I said, it wouldn't be too surprising to see this regain hurricane intensity during the next couple of days while it's over warm water and hasn't gotten sheared yet. And maybe by midweek, Wednesday or so, that shear will start picking up. And as this comes northward, we are expecting conditions to get a lot more hostile for the storm. But again, you can see the uncertainty bubble here at day 5. There's always some uncertainty with the day 5 position, given that we're not exactly sure how strong the storm will be and how it will interact with those complex steering currents and shear as it reaches this point after midweek. So we'll watch to see if it gets a little bit closer to the coast to bring impacts, but expect it to be weakening either way. And if we look at the rainfall coming over the next few days, you can see the core of rain being forecast by WPC as the storm makes its return toward the north. We'll see if any of that gets close to the west coast of the peninsula. But over the remainder of the landmass here in Florida, maybe another inch of rain or so on this WPC forecast over the next few days, but certainly nothing like what we saw yesterday. So hopefully floodwaters will get a chance to recede. So we'll keep an eye on this. Again, small at the moment, keeping most impacts away from Florida for now. We'll see if it sneaks up a little bit closer and hopefully weakening as it is expected to do after midweek. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.